Thank you. So, when Arjun asked me to speak at this event, he told me there's no slides, no formal presentation. So I decided, which I think is better for everyone involved, but I decided I'd just tell three quick stories instead. Um, Two of them about our fundraising experience, but the first one about how I met Arjun. So it was at a TechCrunch event in Zurich. Uh, I remember there was two of us at NewsCred at the time, and we were kind of working the floor, really hustling nonstop. And Swiss people aren't really known for being aggressive or hustling. They're more take it easy, laid back folks. But I noticed out of the corner of my eye there was another guy doing the same thing. And after the event, we went out for drinks, and after the drinks, we went out for post party drinks. And it was 4 a.m. and we were in a kebab shop, and it was me and Arjun. And in Switzerland, if it's 4 a.m., you're either in bed or at the police station or at a kebab shop. And it was three of us. And I remember vowing, and we kind of made this informal pact that, we were going to be the last men standing at every event because we all had ideas, but we really hadn't done much at the time. There was two of us. Arjun was, he just had some ideas about an events company that he was going to start. And sure enough, fast forward 4.5 years, I think you've started two companies, putting on amazing events like this all over the world. So it's pretty amazing what you've done. So I think I haven't seen you. I've seen you once since that kebab shop experience. As for us, I'm Shafqat. I'm a co-founder of NewsCred. We're a venture-backed company here in New York. We're 65 people now, 3 offices. We've gone through three rounds of fundraising, so an angel round, a seed round, and a Series A financing. We've raised around $6.5 million so far. More than that, we've built, what I think is starting to shape up like a real business. And so I thought the two stories that I would share. One is about how we raised our seed round. And the theme there is what I call irrational optimism, which I think is a very essential trait for all entrepreneurs. If you show an entrepreneur a wall, the first thing they think about is, how am I going to get around this wall? They can either sidestep it, they can jump over it. The crazy ones might even try and dig a hole under it. But I think every entrepreneur secretly believes they can actually walk right through it. And that's kind of how I think about irrational optimism. And the second theme of of how we raised our seed round is, don't ever, ever, ever give up. And so this was summer of 2010. We were in Geneva. There were still 2 or 3 of us at that time. So Geneva, Switzerland is where we started our company. Try not to do that, I guess, is the first lesson. And so we were actually out of money. We had a few $1,000s left. So I think we had 3 employees, 3 co-founders. I didn't actually even tell my co-founders that we were pretty much out of money. I think we were a few weeks away. So it's a pretty desperate situation. I think most entrepreneurs, or most people, normal people would throw in the towel, but most entrepreneurs are crazy, as someone mentioned before. So I just had this belief that something would work out. We needed money really bad. Luckily, I had a trip to San Francisco planned from 6 months ago. I was coming over for a friend's wedding. I thought that was going to be the last-ditch effort to save the company. AngelList had just launched. How many people are familiar with AngelList? You heard? Okay, wow, that's pretty amazing. So 2010, I think, was the year, and so AngelList had literally just launched a few months before. I needed some way to get on it. And there was a VC in Geneva. I don't know why he was in Geneva. He's in Boston now, so he also learned the lesson. But his name is Fred Desta. He's with Atlas Venture. And so I met him for lunch, gave him kind of the pitch, put on a brave face, begged him for an intro to Naval, who runs AngelList. For some reason, Fred, I think, took a liking to us. Even though kind of rationally, I don't think we had enough traction where he really should have cared, but he sent an email to Naval, and that's a definition of paying it forward. And we owe Fred because we have, again, 65 or 70 people today. We wouldn't have had it if he didn't send that email. So he sent the email. We got on AngelList. I flew to San Francisco for the wedding. When I arrived on, I think it was Sunday night, we had about 30 or 40 emails from pretty much every investor in the country in my email box. I think it was Mark Andreessen, Fred Wilson, Mike Maples, just amazing investors. I spent the entire week driving up and down Silicon Valley in a beat up Hyundai. I remember when I rented the car, the rental agent asked me, "Are you going to take this on the highway?" And I was like, "Isn't that what you do with most cars?" Because I could only afford, I think, the $20 rental. So I drove that up and down the highway, Sand Hill Road. I remember I had back-to-back meetings, so I was taking certain calls in the parking lot of another investor. It was a crazy week. Somehow I managed to convince Mike Maples, who runs a fund called Floodgate, to give me money. I had a term sheet at the end of the week, and I flew back on Saturday, and basically that saved our company, and we were a week away. So I think the lesson is crazy things happen, and so if you don't give up, and if you're completely irrational, sometimes that helps. And our seed round was kind of all about irrational optimism. And we recently drew up a set of lines that kind of encapsulate the values of our company. And number one was don't ever, ever, ever give up. And this is a story that I tell kind of all new joiners of NewsCred. And the second story I have is how we raised our Series A. It was a little bit less dramatic, but I think there was kind of 5 points that I that I learned along the way that I thought are actionable. I know a lot of people here are out fundraising or will be fundraising. There's also a lot of investors here, which I didn't realize. So some of them might think that it's full of bullshit, but I think this is some interesting tips to potentially hack the process. The first one, I think, is a lot of people get obsessed with the deck, and I think everyone thinks the deck is the most important piece of collateral when you're fundraising. I would argue the most important piece of collateral is yourself. So, I wrote a blog post about these same topics in Mashable, and the title was How to Raise Venture Capital Without a Deck. And that's kind of what we did when we raised our Series A. We actually didn't have a deck prepared until the day before the partners meeting, the Monday partners meeting with Firstmark, when Amish Johnny, who's the partner who led our Series A, realized that, holy shit, we don't have anything to show the other partners, so we quickly scrambled and put a deck together. So you don't need to actually take this advice literally, but the first point that I have is, you should treat raising capital like getting married, and that means you should date and date for a long time. Could get awkward. I dated Amish, even though I was happily married with a wife. So what does that actually mean? It means meeting some of these folks really early, spending a lot of time with them, whether it's meeting for coffee, sharing tips, sharing introductions, leaving comments on their blog, following them on Twitter, doing everything you can to build a relationship without getting creepy, I think is the key. And Mark's sister has a really good post called, VCs invest in lines, not dots, which basically means if you meet someone enough times or build a relationship over time, it's a lot easier to get capital than when you show up the day before you need capital. So that kind of building relationships, that helps with the second point, which is you should never really start a process. When we were doing our Series A, a lot of people ask, oh, when are you going to start your process? Well, we ran the fundraising process for a year and a half before we actually raised money. And I think that's really important because you can just start increasing the cadence at which you meet investors, how much information you share. Instead of just meeting for coffee, you can start sharing spreadsheets with forecasts or revenue models. You can start introducing them to your team, and the whole thing is a seamless experience. The third lesson that we learned is, when you're when you're ready to actually prepare a deck, if you have a deck, don't send it too early. If you're in sales, you know all about creating a proposal, and a deck is not very different from a sales proposal. You would never send a sales proposal too early in the sales process. Everyone should know what's in that proposal. So if you're in B2B sales, there should never be surprise about pricing, about terms of the sale, about what you're actually selling. So I see fundraising deck as almost the same thing. There should never be anything brand new or surprising in the deck that the investor sees for the first time. The fourth thing that we learned kind of while we were doing this fundraising is get as much help as possible. So we were in Geneva, again, not the hotbed for media or startups. I didn't know any investors. And I used to think, woe is me, Geneva sucks, there's no investors, how am I ever going to meet people? But I think that's complete bullshit because entrepreneurs are the most open, friendly, helpful community that I've ever met. Everyone is helpful. So the notion that I don't know investors, that excuse just doesn't fly with me. I try and help as many entrepreneurs as possible. So talk to people, share your ideas. If there's anything else, let me know. I'll be here for the next hour or two. So Arjun, thank you, and hope this was helpful.